December 26, 2025, scientists pull the cover off a face that has not seen daylight in 146,000 years, a forensic recreation built from a skull hidden for nearly a century. It is Dragon Man, finally revealed, and what comes next exposes a secret museums hoped would stay buried. For 87 years, this fossil's true story was locked away. Now the evidence challenges everything you thought you knew about human origins. The story begins with a single skull no museum dared to display. A single skull, hidden for nearly a century, has now become a face. On December 26, 2025, a team of forensic artists and anthropologists unveiled the reconstructed visage of Dragon Man, an archaic human whose features had been lost to time since the Pleistocene. The process began with a CT scan, the same type used in modern crime labs, capturing every ridge and cavity in the fossilized bone. Layer by layer, digital artists rebuilt muscle, fat, and skin, guided by the scars and anchor points left on the skull. The result is a face that looks both familiar and utterly alien. A broad, flat face, massive brow ridges like a built-in visor, and eye sockets so large they seem designed for a world of dim light and biting cold. The nose is wide, adapted for breathing icy air, while the jaw hints at a bite force capable of crushing tough roots or sinew. The reveal sent shockwaves through the scientific community and beyond. News outlets flashed side-by-side comparisons. Dragon Man's skull next to modern human and Neanderthal, the differences unmistakable. Social media lit up with debates and disbelief. For the first time, Denisovans, those shadowy cousins once known only from a finger bone and a few teeth, had a face. The forensic team behind the reconstruction, working from Hebei GEO University and collaborating labs, described the moment as a fusion of science and detective work. Every contour was anchored in evidence, every guess checked against data from both ancient and living humans. Yet even as the new face dominated headlines, questions swirled. If this is what one lost human looked like, how many more faces are missing from the story? And why did it take nearly 90 years for Dragon Man to step into the light? Harbin, 1933. The banks of the Songhua River echoed with the clang of steel as workers built a bridge for a city under foreign occupation. One laborer, whose name is lost to history, unearthed something in the mud, a skull so large and heavy it seemed impossible. He recognized its value, and he recognized its danger. With Japanese forces controlling Manchuria and suspicion everywhere, the safest choice was secrecy. He lowered the skull into a well, hiding it from soldiers and officials. For decades, the artifact stayed hidden, passed quietly from father to son, as regimes rose and fell. The family's silence was shaped by fear, first of Japanese authorities, then of the nationalists, and later of the communist government, which during the Cultural Revolution seized artifacts and punished those accused of protecting the past. No one outside the family knew of the skull's existence. As the years turned into decades, the world's understanding of human origins changed again and again, but the Harbin skull remained a secret. Only in 2018, after the last keeper grew old, did the family decide to act. They brought the skull to Hebei GEO University, trusting that science, not politics, might finally have its turn. For the first time, researchers could examine the fossil's massive brain case, its thick brow, its strange blend of ancient and advanced features. The skull's journey, from muddy riverbank to locked well to university lab, had taken 85 years. The long silence left scientists with a puzzle, a face without a story, a fossil without context. The lost decades meant missing clues, no excavation records, no associated tools, no way to pinpoint its age, except through the chemistry of the bone itself. Yet the skull's survival depended on that secrecy. Without the family's caution, Dragon Man might never have reached the hands of those who could finally ask what and who he really was. When the Harbin skull finally reached the lab benches at Hebei GEO University in 2018, researchers faced a puzzle that did not fit any familiar template. The first step was a forensic-style workup, measuring every curve, ridge, and cavity with digital calipers and CT scans. The numbers told their own story. The skull's brain case measured 1,420 cubic centimeters, putting it at the top end for any archaic human, and even a bit above the modern human average of 1,350 cubic centimeters. The face was massive and wide, yet surprisingly flat, with a broad nasal opening and large, almost square eye sockets. The brow ridge stood out as a thick, continuous bar of bone, more pronounced than in most living people, but the overall facial profile projected less than a Neanderthal's. These features did not match the classic Neanderthal or Homo erectus playbook. The team, led by Chiang Ji, cataloged each trait and compared them to a database of fossil skulls from across Eurasia. The Harbin specimen stood apart, robust and ancient, but with a suite of distinct anatomical details. Radiometric and geochemical analyses narrowed its age to between 146,000 and 309,000 years. With no mandible and no associated artifacts, the skull alone had to carry the weight of classification. In 2021, the team published their findings and named the new species Homo longi, dragon man. The name reflected both the fossil's Chinese heritage and its imposing scale. Their assessment placed dragon man as a close relative to modern humans, potentially even closer than Neanderthals. Not everyone agreed. Some paleontologists argued that a single skull was not enough to define a new species, and that it might represent a regional variety of another archaic group. But the Harbin cranium was now part of the scientific record, its measurements and features open to scrutiny and debate. For the first time, Dragon Man had an official label and a place in the ongoing story of human evolution. January 7, 2026. News breaks from Morocco. A North African research team announces the discovery of 13 ancient hominin fossils in the Grotta de Rinoceros cave near Casablanca. The reported age, 773,000 years, places these remains deep in the Acheulean era, a time when early humans shaped hand axes from stone and hunted alongside extinct megafauna. The fossils come from multiple individuals, adults and children, scattered across a single sediment layer, sealed beneath layers of ancient sand and limestone. Their features are immediately striking. Wide faces, thick brow ridges, and large, nearly square eye sockets echo the traits seen in the Harbin skull from China. But the shock comes from the sheer distance. 6,000 miles separate these Moroccan bones from the original Dragon Man cranium. For decades, the story of Denisovans and their relatives was confined to Asia and Siberia. Now, stone tools and fossil fragments in North Africa force scientists to reconsider everything they thought they knew about ancient human migration and contact. The Moroccan team, working with European collaborators, reveals that these fossils were found alongside Acheulean tools, hand axes and cleavers chipped from quartzite, the signature technology of early humans. Quartzite is the stone most often used for these tools. Dating methods, including electron spin resonance and uranium series analysis, converge on the same staggering figure, 773,000 years old. The announcement stuns the paleoanthropology world. Human evolution is no longer a story written in one region's soil. The web of our ancestry now stretches from the Yellow River to the Atlantic coast. Inside the lab, the process of turning a fossilized skull into a living face begins with precision and patience. Technicians start by running the Harbin cranium through a medical-grade CT scanner, capturing thousands of digital slices that record every detail down to the smallest pit or ridge. These scans are stitched together into a three-dimensional model, a virtual skull that can be rotated, measured, and even digitally repaired if any fragments are missing. The next step draws directly from forensic casework. Specialists identify the scars and bumps where muscles once anchored to bone. Each of these points acts like a forensic clue, setting hard boundaries for the shape and thickness of the face. Standardized tissue depth markers, numbers collected from hundreds of modern humans, are mapped onto the digital skull at dozens of locations. This is not guesswork. It is a system built on decades of anatomical research, the same protocols used to identify unknown victims in police investigations. Digital artists then layer on muscles, building them up from the bone outward, following the attachment points and the rules of human anatomy. The shape of the nose is guided by the opening in the skull and the projection of the nasal spine. The eyes are placed within their orbits, sized and oriented according to the bony margins. Even the thickness of the lips and the fullness of the cheeks are grounded in the underlying structure, leaving little room for artistic license. Every step is documented and reversible, allowing experts to debate and revise the model as new evidence comes in. What emerges is not just a face, but a testable hypothesis, one that ties each visible feature to a hard anatomical fact. Numbers tell their own story when it comes to Dragon Man's skull. CT scans reveal a cranium built on a scale rarely seen in human evolution. The brain case holds about 1,420 cubic centimeters, larger than the average for modern humans. But it is the face that truly stands apart. The width, measured across the cheekbones, is broader than almost any living person, giving the entire face a striking rectangular outline. The brow ridge forms a thick, solid bar of bone above the eyes, a natural visor more robust than in most people alive today. Where modern humans might have a gentle curve, Dragon Man's brow is pronounced and unbroken, a testament to the bone's strength. The eye sockets are unusually large and nearly square, a feature rarely matched in other fossil skulls. This extraorbital area hints at adaptation for low-light environments, possibly allowing more light to reach the retina during long winters or in dense forests. Below, the nasal opening is wide and tall. Such a large airway would help warm and humidify frigid air before it reached the lungs, a trait shared with other Ice Age humans, but expressed here with its own geometry. The lower face, though missing the complete jaw, shows robust anchor points for powerful chewing muscles. The remaining molar is large and heavily worn, suggesting a diet that demanded significant bite force, including tough roots, raw meat, or perhaps frozen plant material. Taken together, these measurements create a profile that is both familiar and alien. Dragon Man's skull is not simply a scaled-up version of ours. It is a blueprint shaped by cold climates, hard food, and evolutionary pressures that left their mark in bone. Each dimension, from brow to cheek to orbit, is a data point in the larger puzzle of what it meant to survive in the ancient world. In 2025, the Harbin skull's secrets were finally pried open in the lab. Researchers extracted ancient proteins from the inner ear bone, and they scraped mitochondrial DNA from hardened dental plaque on the lone surviving molar. The results were unmistakable. Both lines of evidence, protein signatures and mitochondrial sequences, matched those of Denisovans, a vanished branch of humanity once known only from a finger bone and a few teeth in a Siberian cave. For the first time, scientists could say with confidence, Dragon Man was Denisovan. Not a distant cousin, not an evolutionary dead end, but a member of a group whose DNA still lingers in millions of people alive today. This was not just a technical triumph. It was a direct challenge to the story told in the world's great museums. For decades, exhibit halls have presented a clean linear chart: Australopithecus, Homo erectus, Neanderthal, and then us, Homo sapiens. Neanderthals, we are told, are our closest extinct relatives, but the lab evidence from Harbin redraws the map. Denisovans, and by extension Dragon Man, are not a footnote or a sidebar. They are a sister group to Neanderthals, equally close on the evolutionary tree, and their legacy lives on in the DNA of people from East Asia to Melanesia. Some populations in Papua New Guinea and Australia carry up to 5% Denisovan ancestry, a genetic inheritance from ancient encounters that shaped who we are. Yet 3 years after the first molecular clues tied Dragon Man to Denisovans, museum displays still lag behind. Walk through the Human Origins Hall at the Smithsonian or the galleries in London, and the story remains unchanged. Neanderthals get the spotlight, their faces reconstructed in lifelike detail. Denisovans, if they appear at all, are a silhouette or a question mark. The evidence is out in the open, published in top journals, but the institutions charged with educating the public have not caught up. The contradiction is stark. In the lab, the human family tree is a tangled web of branches and hybrids. On the walls, it is still a straight line, and Dragon Man's face is nowhere to be seen. Denisovans once seemed like a rumor, Just a finger bone, a few teeth, and scraps of DNA pulled from the cold soil of Siberia. Now, with the Harbin skull, their presence is no longer invisible. For the first time, scientists can match a face to the genetic traces that run through millions of people alive today. The connection is not just a matter of ancient bones. It is written in the DNA of modern populations from East Asia to the islands of Melanesia. Population geneticists have mapped the spread of Denisovan ancestry across the globe. In some regions of Papua New Guinea and Australia, up to 5% of the genome comes from these archaic humans. Even in East Asia, smaller but significant fragments remain, reminders of ancient encounters and interbreeding events that shaped our species. These are not relics of the past, but living legacies. Genes inherited from Denisovans help modern Tibetans survive at high altitudes and may influence immune responses in Southeast Asian populations. The story of Denisovan DNA is not just about who our ancestors were, but how their adaptations still help people thrive in some of the world's most challenging environments. The fossil record is fragmentary. Denisovans are known from a handful of bones and teeth scattered across Asia, from the Altai Mountains to the Tibetan Plateau. The Harbin skull, now tied to this elusive lineage, fills in a face for a people who left their mark not only in stone tools and cave sediments, but in the bloodlines of living families. For many, learning about this ancestry brings both surprise and pride. It is a reminder that the boundaries between ancient and modern are blurred, and that the human story is a braided river, not a single stream. The Denisovan legacy is not locked in a museum drawer. It walks the streets of today's cities, climbs the mountains, and lives on in the everyday lives of their descendants. Renovating a single hall in a major natural history museum is not a quick fix. The Human Origins Hall at the Smithsonian, for example, cost over $2 million to update last time, before Dragonman's face was even in the picture. In London, the Natural History Museum's permanent galleries are budgeted for up to $5 million per overhaul, and the American Museum of Natural History in New York faces similar figures. Each redesign is a multi-year project involving architects, fabricators, educators, and a long chain of approval from donors and boards. Every new discovery, especially one as disruptive as Dragon Man, means not just swapping out a few panels, but rethinking the entire story told to millions of visitors each year. The financial drag is only part of the inertia. Exhibit timelines are planned years in advance, often locked in before the latest science makes headlines. Curators must weigh the risk of overhauling displays on the basis of new but still debated findings. A single fossil that redraws the family tree can force a reckoning with every mural, model, and diorama. Dragon Man does not just add a face, he demands a new map. A web with 5 human species alive at once, not a simple ladder. That complexity comes with a price tag and a logistical headache. For museums already stretched thin, the prospect of rewriting the human story is not just daunting, it is expensive, and it means admitting that what is on display may already be out of date. Behind every public exhibit, a shadow world of drawers and cabinets holds the real bulk of humanity's fossil record. Most visitors never see these archives. Rows of boxes labeled with faded tags, specimens sorted decades ago under frameworks that now look shaky. For collection managers and archivists, the job is endless: catalog, preserve, and when time and funding allow, re-examine. But the backlog is staggering. In China alone, major discoveries like the Dali skull, unearthed in 1978, and the Jinyushan skeleton, found in 1984, have sat for years with labels that no longer fit the questions scientists are asking. Dali, with its blend of archaic and modern traits, was once assigned to archaic Homo sapiens or late Homo erectus. Now, with the Harbin skull as a template for Denisovan features, researchers are starting to ask if Dali and fossils like the Maba cranium, found in 1958, might actually be part of the same lost lineage. This is not just an Asian problem. French museums, for example, hold Moroccan fossils collected during the colonial era, many of which have never been re-examined with modern techniques. Advances in CT scanning, proteomics, and ancient DNA are rewriting the rules of identification, but only for specimens that make it out of storage and onto the lab bench. For every dragon man that finally gets a face, there may be dozens of potential relatives languishing in drawers misclassified by old taxonomies. The real revolution in understanding human evolution may not require new digs in the field. It may be waiting in the archives, hidden in plain sight, just a scan or a test away from rewriting the story again. Every breakthrough in human evolution comes with a price, and the real bottleneck is often money, not science. Research grants in paleoanthropology routinely range from $200,000 to $800,000 per project. These awards fund everything from fieldwork and CT scans to lab analyses and salaries, but the system rewards safe bets. Proposals that challenge established models, like the Out of Africa timeline or the tidy family tree, face an uphill battle in peer review. Grant panels, made up of senior scientists, tend to favor projects that reinforce consensus, not those that might overturn it. For a young researcher, publishing a paper that questions the mainstream narrative is a gamble. Careers are built on steady output, not controversy. One wrong move, a claim that a fossil should be reclassified, or that human evolution is more tangled than the textbooks say, and funding can dry up. Donors play their own role. Museums and universities rely on private gifts and endowments to keep halls open and labs running. Controversial findings risk alienating major supporters or making headlines for the wrong reasons. That is why so many fossils, especially those that do not fit the expected pattern, gather dust in storage rooms. The path to publication is smoother when discoveries fit the story donors and boards already know. China's academic system offers a counter-example. The Harbin skull's path from private hands to scientific publication bypassed some of the Western gatekeeping, giving Chinese researchers more freedom to propose a new species and push for molecular analysis. But even there, the pressure to conform is real. In the end, the science moves forward only as fast as the money allows, and as long as the risks do not threaten the next round of funding. Human ancestry is not a straight line from primitive to modern. Instead, it is a patchwork, woven from encounters, migrations, and chance. Dragon Man's DNA, now identified as Denisovan, is only part of the story. Geneticists have mapped fragments of Denisovan ancestry scattered across Asia, Melanesia, and even the peaks of Tibet. In some communities, several percent of the genome traces back to these ancient people. That means millions today carry invisible signatures of archaic humans, reminders that our species is the product of interbreeding and survival, not isolation. The Pleistocene world was a place of extremes. Ice ages came and went, reshaping continents and forcing human groups to adapt or move. Cold snaps favored those with broader noses and larger bodies, traits that show up in both Neanderthals and Denisovans. But adaptation alone was not enough. Survival often depended on luck, finding the right refuge, stumbling on a new food source, or simply being in the right place when the climate shifted. Interbreeding was not a rare accident, it was a strategy. When populations met, genes flowed between them, mixing traits that might help the next generation survive. The result is a genetic mosaic, not a single unbroken thread. Every fossil, every fragment of DNA, points to a tangled web of ancestors, some known and many still hidden. The old diagrams in textbooks and museum halls, with their tidy ladders and sharp divisions, miss this reality. Human evolution is a story of mixing, migration, and contingency. The face of Dragon Man is a reminder that us has always meant more than one lineage. It is a story still being written, shaped as much by climate and chance as by any single discovery. Less than 1% of the world's fossil-bearing sites have ever been systematically excavated. Every year, field teams fan out across deserts, jungles, and mountain plateaus, searching for the next fragment that might rewrite our understanding of human origins. The map of past discoveries is riddled with blank spaces, regions where climate, politics, or sheer inaccessibility have left the prehistoric record untouched. The Tibetan Plateau, for example, has yielded just a handful of bones, yet Denisovan DNA found in the Xiahe mandible, hints at entire populations living at high altitude. In the rainforests of Southeast Asia, acidic soils dissolve bone almost as quickly as it is buried, but stone tools and rare teeth suggest that archaic humans thrived there for millennia. The Arabian Peninsula, once a green corridor, remains largely unexplored beneath shifting dunes. In 2025, a team working in Ethiopia uncovered 13 fossil teeth, each over 2.5 million years old. None matched known species. These tiny clues suggest that the human family tree is even bushier than textbooks admit. Field archaeologists now use satellite imaging, drone surveys, and geoprospecting to target hidden caves and buried riverbeds anywhere ancient humans might have left a trace. The sheer scale of the unknown dwarfs what is already in museum drawers. For every famous skull on display, there could be dozens more waiting in the ground or mislabeled in storage. The scientists leading these digs know that every new site has the potential to overturn old certainties. Their work is slow, often frustrating, but it is the only way to fill in the blank spaces. Each fresh discovery is a reminder. The story of human evolution is far from finished, and the next face to challenge our assumptions could surface anywhere. Inside the world's most visited natural history museums, the wheels are finally turning. At the Smithsonian, curators have begun drafting plans for a complete overhaul of the Human Origins Hall, a process that could take years and cost millions of dollars. The last major redesign, completed before the Denisovan phase was known, is already out of date. Now internal memos call for new display cases, updated family trees, and a fresh approach to the story of human ancestry. In London, the Natural History Museum has added disclaimers to its evolution exhibits, quietly acknowledging that the science on display is always a work in progress. Visitors passing through the galleries find new placards. This exhibit reflects current knowledge as of 2025. Scientific understanding is subject to change. Textbook publishers face their own dilemma. Every new edition is a gamble. Should they wait for consensus or risk including discoveries that might be revised by the time the next print run rolls out? For most, the answer is caution. It can take 5 to 10 years for breakthroughs like the Harbin skull to filter from journals into classroom materials. In the meantime, students are taught a story that scientists themselves know is incomplete. Some museum directors now speak openly about the need for humility. The old certainty, the idea that the human story could be told as a straight line from ape to modern man, has given way to something messier but more honest. Curators debate how to present uncertainty as a feature, not a flaw. They weigh how much to rewrite and how much to leave as a record of changing knowledge. Behind the scenes, teams are combing storage rooms, pulling out fossils and artifacts that might need a second look in light of the Dragon Man findings. There is a sense that the next big discovery could be waiting in a box, mislabeled or forgotten, ready to upend the story again. The challenge now is not just to catch up, but to build displays and lessons that can adapt as fast as the science itself. Today, museum halls still display a tidy story, even though the real evidence is messier, unfinished, and sitting in back rooms. As new discoveries force us to redraw our human family tree, the question is not what we know, but what we are willing to admit we do not. Progress depends on discomfort. The next phase to change everything may already be gathering dust behind a locked door. What do you think museums owe us, certainty or the truth?